Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm John D'Amico of the Niagara Board of Trade and Commerce, and on behalf of the Niagara Chamber Partnership, which includes Fort Erie, Grimsby, Lincoln, Niagara Falls, Niagara-on-the-Lake, Thorold, Port Colborne, Waynflete, Welland Pelham, and West Lincoln Chambers. I'd like to welcome you to our final session of our spring series. This will be our fifth and last for this 1 year, and we hope that you have gained some insight into the sectors that we have featured. I want to thank our tech sponsors, B4 Networks, truly the tech specialists that everyone needs these days. We're also incredibly fortunate to have John Armstrong from Armstrong Communications, a longtime champion of our local chambers, as the moderator of this series. So without further delay, I will turn it over to John Armstrong.
Thank you, John. And I'd like to welcome everybody to our last segment of Niagara's Road to Recovery. We are here today talking about the not-for-profit sector, a sector that is actually significantly bigger than probably a lot of people think. It may even rival the size of the manufacturing sector when you total things all up. So it's an incredibly important sector. Our panelists today include Stephen Chuang from the YMCA, Mark Carl from Habitat for Humanity, Elizabeth Zimmerman from the YWCA, and David Vandersteen from the Fort Youth Center in Grimsby. Welcome, everybody. So why don't we start ourselves off as we've done with all of these sessions, to just kind of go through and tell everybody what the last 15 months has been like for your organization, how you've managed, and that kind of sets the stage for us looking forward to how we do that recovery. Why don't we start ourselves off with you, Stephen? I know the YMCA was in the throes of some challenges to begin with, and so I'm sure the pandemic had a significant impact. And I know you just came on. You came on board one of those pandemic hires where you seeing a fair number of those. So why don't you tell us how things have been at the YMCA?
Well, thank you very much for having me and for the introduction. So I just want to begin by saying that the YMCA is a charity, and we're obviously not just in health, fitness, aquatics, and like some people may think, but we cover a whole range of programming that promotes healthy living and fostering social responsibility in the community. And we offer programs ranging into community initiatives, childcare, day camp, employment, immigrant services, and we're supported by a very active and thriving set of volunteers. To respond to your question, John, yes, I am in my shoes for only maybe 7 weeks or so. So I can't really speak to the whole history of the past 15 months, but I can say, based on what I've heard and what I've seen, we're just like one of many charities that had been affected significantly by the pandemic. The Ontario Nonprofit Network predicted that 20% of the charities are going to be in danger due to the impact and fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're not alone. I can speak to this significantly because we need to, as a YMCA, we need to balance fee-for-service programming versus government-funded services and also charitable raised dollars. And we've seen all three affected considerably. I mean, just looking at pre-pandemic to the present time, we've lost, in tens of millions of dollars because of this, because we simply couldn't open our facilities and we had to really downsize significantly, as you've seen in the news. And we're not alone. So the YMCA of Niagara isn't alone. The YMCAs across Canada have felt impact on all sides of the equation. And this really speaks to the realities and restrictions to ensure that there's health and safety, resulted in closure of our operations and diminished fees, combined with rising expenses in many programmatic offerings. We also noticed that key funders have to reprioritize grants towards short-term COVID needs like PPE supplies and capital retrofits away from multi-year program grants, leaving more uncertainty for our organization's long-term sustainability. We also see that philanthropic donors are challenged to make hard decisions to select their charity of choice among many to support with their precious financial gift. So they have to decide, do we want to donate to health-related initiatives versus more of a social benefit initiative? Like other YMCAs across the country, the YMCA of Niagara faced immediate downsizing, even permanent closure of our local programs and sites. And as you've seen, from the Niagara Falls McBain Center to the ongoing issue with our Walker YMCA in St. Catharines, we've also been able to take advantage of government subsidies like CEWS, and we had to do layoffs despite having CEWS subsidies. And many of our staff have to contemplate, whether this is the career of choice that they wish to stay for the long term, given the uncertainty moving forward. So a lot of challenges that we're not only grappling today, but also for the long term.
Yeah, I know the YMCA's have been struggling with their social enterprise model for a number of years. I know particularly, however, through the pandemic, Mark, the habitats rely very much on the restores. Maybe you could talk a little bit about where you've been for the last 15 months.
Sure, thank you, and thank you, John, thank you for hosting and having me. Yeah, we've had ours has been a tale of two different pluses and minuses on it. As you said, we are a social enterprise, and our end goal at the end of the day is to house families in affordable housing, home ownership, and we really think in Habitat that changes and breaks the cycle of poverty. And we hate to use that term, but it's something that really does happen when someone has equity, owns a home. The children have stability. The children go to one school. The children have friends. They have friends over for a sleepover. They don't worry about moving from place to place to, and they don't have to worry about a landlord selling the building. So we've had, so that is our end goal in our building. And how we pay for that, though, is we pay through that, any fundraising dollars that come in have to go directly to the house, but how we pay for all our operations and towards buying land and houses is our restores. And our restores are, people donate products, we get donated products, we kind of liquidate some products that are getting liquidated, we sell them in a retail. And we have 3 locations, Grimsby, St. Catharines, and Font Hill. It's a tale of, we had to shut down 3 times. We had to close the doors 3 times. The first time it was just a straight out lockdown in March, and we just didn't have any sales. We laid all the staff off. That was challenging. We had no revenue coming in, no income coming in. And so paying our bills was becoming difficult. Second time around during the second lockdown, and we ended up where we did online sales. So we actually, quickly scrambled and figured out how to sell stuff online, and it went well. But then the third lockdown, when we opened back up, and this is where I talk about a tale of 2 stories. We were blessed in the sense that a lot of people were doing home renovations, and a lot of people had time. And so if you took the actual, January, February shutdown of this year, and then we opened up for March and had record sales, and then we were closed down April, May into June. So even selling online, we struggled with getting donations and new products and things like that because we were closed down, and you can't really go pick up new products from somebody's house during a pandemic. So we were struggling all around. So I would say this, our staff and our volunteers did a brilliant job, but that was part of what we missed too. We couldn't have volunteers in. We have a whole pile of job training programs in our stores where youth come and get trained and learn how to work retail, and all the soft skills of showing up on time. All that was gone because you couldn't, you had to watch who you had in. So, we did okay. And part of it was, the people were buying and people were donating, but we found in the third wave, just not being able to collect donations, we were really short on donations that we needed now, and it just affected our bottom line. It just affected and made it difficult, especially, like I said, last year went well, but this year was really tough because being closed for donations, and then you're running out of stuff, and now as we reopen, we need those donations to sell. So do you think there's
pent up supply, sort of, as people who've done their house renovations, still have all their stuff hanging around their house, or has it all gone to the dump, or has it all been sold out through Kijiji, or like where is all that stuff? Because it's gone somewhere.
A couple things, and couple things on exactly like you said. Somewhat, there's some pent up supply. Other things, people put it on Facebook Marketplace and just said, well, we had a lot of calls like that, and we got back to people and said, listen, we can pick it up when it's over, when the pandemic's over and we reopen. Oh no, I sold it on Marketplace. I just didn't want it sitting around, and I got $40 for it. By the way, right? That opens up a whole nother level of kind of competition.
Because the way your model works, sorry, just to jump in for a second, the way your model works is I've got a product, I've got an extra screen door, for example. I give it to you, then you sell it, you get the money, and then you issue me a tax receipt, right, for the sale, sale price?
Or the value, or they estimate the value of it, that they half of what the retail value would be or less, depending on how it is. So yes, that's how they end up. You get a tax receipt. That's how the model works. You donate it.
Right.
But main things that does is that at the end of the day, that helps us build houses in Niagara, or helps us build for affordable housing, and at the same for families, helps change the lives of individuals. But when we were struggling to keep open, that just affects that bottom line. So but two sides to it, John. You're right. We struggled through those closure times, but I think the community has been really supportive. I think part of it that people are doing so much home renovations in their homes so much that it also helped us out too. So it's a bit of a, we're down in sales, we're down in revenue, but we're not where I thought we would be. If you told me we're only going to be open 1 month out of 6 months this year, I would have thought, close the doors and we're done, right? But we're not. We're still here, and online sales were decent, so we're okay. So yeah,
that's great. So Elizabeth, you have probably a different kind of composite of programs that you offer. You have a different kind of clientele that you serve. Maybe you can tell us kind of where the YWCA has been in the last 15 months, and maybe kind of an impact on what you're seeing on the ground with your client population.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy 15 months from the very beginning of the pandemic. We've had. We've been very fortunate as one of the largest providers in Niagara of sheltering for homeless women and families. The reality was our programs had to make sure we continued. We have families in transitional supported housing. So all of our programs basically had to continue. We certainly did see some financial impact, but we also saw incredible generosity in the community in terms of we received a large donation from the Bain McCall Foundation, which was really, we were very grateful for because it ensured sustainability of our programs. But I think for us, the largest concern was, helping to support staff who are managing through this unprecedented pandemic where, for the first months, we didn't really quite know what we were dealing with and how to be safe around that. How do we continue to operate our shelters? How do we ensure that both our staff and the residents in our programs are safe? We worked very closely with the Niagara region's community services as well as public health to ensure that we were able to minimize risk to the population we were serving. But the stress levels were through the roof for everybody, for both those coming into shelter as well as for the staff. There was a lot of demands on staff, a lot of again, unknowns. But I have to say, the staff have been absolutely remarkable in terms of, transitioning and managing through. And, we've, in our one facility, we did have 3 different occasions where we had people identified with COVID. And so it enacted, an outbreak. And so how we managed through that. But I have to say, staff have been absolutely remarkable in terms of how they've managed. And we've been very fortunate, again, at the community support that we received. Certainly we've seen losses in one side, but on the other side, we've seen great response to the need.
Where
And so, sorry?
Where have the losses come from?
Well, one of the places we had significant loss was bingo revenue, which, kind of, you don't really think about, but for us, it funded a couple of programs that we have, or supported programs. So this is where we were really grateful for additional funding through through the foundation, through the McCall Big Bain Foundation, because it helped to offset those losses. And so in that, we were able to ensure that we could continue to run in full capacity without any financial concerns. I think the other thing too, we were able to open new programs, which, again, was remarkable, but again, due to supports, we were able to run, to begin our safer house for victims of human trafficking. And as you are well aware, John, we've been able to build a building and begin a new program for women who've experienced chronic homelessness, as well as our shelter for two-parent families. So, it's been, as Mark said, there's been highs, there's been lows. But it has been a highly stressful time. Again, we've seen community-wide a huge increase in the number of opioid deaths. We've certainly experienced that ourselves, the stress level that people are experiencing. We've seen suicides that have happened. And so that also creates, a huge amount of stress for the community, for the residents, and for our staff who've been working with these individuals.
Has your client population changed at all?
No, not yet. I'm concerned as we start to see the community open back up again. We see the reduction in government benefits, people not being able to get back into employment. There are certainly some huge concerns that I have, especially because we've seen a continued escalation in the cost of housing through the pandemic. And so, at this point, we're managing, but we've been full throughout, which we have for the last several years, in our shelters and in all of our housing programs for that matter. But it's going to be what comes next that I think I'm even more concerned about.
Right. And David, you're in Grimsby with the Fort Youth Center. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what the Fort does, how your organization has been over the last 15 months, and then we might as well throw a third question in there: how you think your client, your youth population has been faring?
For sure. So I'm aware that probably a lot of people are not totally familiar with the Fort. We are a small organization. We're out here in West Niagara. We run youth centers. We have one youth center in Grimsby and one up in Smithville.
Oh, okay.
And we provide youth programs for ages 11 to 18. And our goal is to provide basically whatever support they need at any given time. So in the last 15 months, that's been supporting them through COVID in particular, and helping them deal with the new world that they found themselves in, helping them deal primarily with online schooling has been a huge issue, and dealing with, of course, all of the mental health ramifications that have come out of the last 15 months. And we all know the last 15 months have not been easy for anyone, but teenagers in particular who are already dealing with everything that comes with being a teenager, and then throwing a global pandemic on top of it has been a lot. And so we're seeing obviously huge increases in depression, anxiety, isolation, and these kids who are trying to deal with the fact that now, they can't even go outside, they can't see their friends. People are telling them, if you go hug your grandparents, you could kill them. And that's been incredibly difficult for them. So we've been doing as much as we can to help support them through that. We did turn our programs into online programs, just making sure that they had groups that they could hang out with. They could still at least talk to people, even if they couldn't see them in person, trying to make sure that everyone was still getting the help they needed, particularly in crisis situations. We saw a massive increase in the demand for things like professional mental health counseling, which is a program we're able to offer out here. And those programs are always in need and always have a wait list, and that list just keeps getting longer. Speaking as a small organization, because we are very, very local, it was sort of as I think Mark said, the two sides there, that yeah, there were significant challenges. We did see a big drop in donor revenue, which for us is a major part of our budget. You know, our Christmas campaign was down by about 30% last year, because we get a significant amount of our donor base is the very small, like $25 to $50 donations. And those weren't happening last year. People just didn't have the spare change. On the other hand, being a small organization, it was a lot easier for us to adapt quickly. We got our programs up and running online almost immediately. We didn't have to lay off staff, which was a huge bonus for us. And we know we're very, very lucky in that regard. And the government's wage support and COVID relief programs were a huge help to us as well. So it could have certainly been a lot worse, but we're looking forward to rebuilding.
How was that transition? I mean, when I think of the fort, I think of it really anchored around location and that kind of drop-in center and that kind of place for young people to go who may not really have any other place to go, and now being shut down. How have you found that transition from not being anchored in place to online? Because I'd assume, maybe I'm wrong, but I would assume that a lot of your population would be a vulnerable population as well, with a lower income that may not be able to have the same kind of access to the online resources that others might have. So how's that gone?
Well, we certainly made sure everybody could access online resources. It sort of worked well for us in tandem with the school systems, because they were also making sure that all of the youth had access to online systems, because they needed to do basically the same thing we were doing. So that worked out very well. And one bonus of working with teenagers is they're young, they know how computers work. Nobody's sitting there going, how do I do my Zoom? So in that regard, it was easy. It was a lot more difficult for the kids, I think. They value so much being able to just come to our centers. It's a safe place for them, and it's not home and it's not school. And for a lot of these kids, not having that in their day-to-day lives anymore was very difficult. And being stuck at home, doing Zoom school all day, sitting all day on your laptop, staring at a screen with your classmates, and then your only social option for the evening also being staring at a screen with your friends, it's too much. It was too much for a lot of kids, and there wasn't a whole lot we could do about it except for offer as much as we could. Say, like, here, you know, we can play lots of games, we can talk, we can do one-on-one sessions. It was different for every kid, right? Every kid needed a different level of support.
Did you find that your client population changed through this process? Did you lose some young people who may be sort of regular users of the fort and kind of attract some new ones? What happened to your client population?
We certainly saw like some kids who would come to our centers every day didn't necessarily join the online sessions every day,
right?
Because just exhaustion for the most part. Yeah, and then some kids who we used to see only infrequently, that might only come once a month, yeah, we would see them a couple times a week because it was easier to do so from home. So yeah, both really.
Yeah. So Stephen, what about your client population, or should I say the transition from in facilities to online? How's that gone for the YM? Has your client population changed and adjusted, or what? It's got to be tricky.
It is. It has been quite challenging for sure. I know that we had to adapt many of our programs and services to virtual offerings. And we really had to do that because we needed to preserve our long-term viability. We needed to open up some resources so that we can invest back in the community in a way that's ultimately about longer-term sustainability. And so from a virtualization standpoint, our immigrant and employment services program was actually very quick to transition to virtual sessions and workshops. We actually leverage platforms like YouTube and Facebook Live. So we're very much tuned into the social media platform. For our early on program, which is a universal program, we began offering workshops and activities also on YouTube and then eventually on Zoom, which is also endorsed by our funder in this case. And almost immediately, our entire health and fitness programs stepped up to provide fitness classes on YouTube. And we actually had quite a bit of free programming on YMCA at Home, which is also pre-recorded virtual classes that anyone can tune in and just join at any time. And what we had noticed was that as people got more comfortable with this virtual technology and that we're not going away anytime soon, that we had built up this popularity of pre-recorded content and really being able to deliver them not only recorded, but also live fitness classes via Zoom. And so even just on a weekly basis, we offer more than 30 classes that are virtual fitness classes in partnership with another Y in GTA. And so at the same time, I know that some of our panelists here talked about mental health. And so our community team started trying to tackle a range of social and mental health programs virtually. And even last summer, as we're looking to the summer, we have offered a variety of programs targeting vulnerable children and youth across the region. But now we've also opened up to in-person, more so than ever. I will say that the biggest change for us is for any in-person programming, as things get more loose from a restriction standpoint, we had to rethink about how we're going to offer them in a safe way, respecting infection prevention and control protocols, and also what the government allows us to do. So really just navigating the ever-changing public health requirements, also with keeping our clients maintained and engaged, is the balance that we struggle with on a really daily and weekly basis.
Yeah. So Mark, I know you're in a slightly different circumstance, well, significantly different circumstance. You're in the construction sector. So did you guys keep building through this period, or what's happened to your the Habitat's building program?
So when the first shutdown occurred, we stopped. We shut everything down. Just unsure, lack of knowledge, all that around the pandemic. But after that, we kept building. So we built 2 houses throughout the pandemic so far. So, and just the second one's just being finished. And we had that delay time in there. We had a 4-month shutdown. One of the Habitat models, John, just never stop building. If you go down to the deep south where Habitat was born, and they say if you stop building, you're stopping the mission. So one of them is just keep building. It was challenging though. Our whole mission is bringing the community together to build affordable housing, and we couldn't bring the community together. So we really kind of fit into that typical kind of builder situation where we had, a foreman, and we're bringing in trades and people like that. So that increased the cost, and it diminished our ability to fundraise as well. So, we were doing that because we had families selected. There was families that were waiting for homes. We delayed families 1 year though. We were supposed to build 3 houses, and families are getting their homes this year, so they got delayed. And that's hard. When you get excited, you're gonna get a home. You're gonna start paying a mortgage. You're gonna own a home and make those mortgage payments, but you're still paying rent. But yeah, to answer your question, we did it in a very safe way, where it might be 1 or 2 construction people on at a time. It probably put another 3 months on each build, 3 to 4 months on each build, expended that time. The second thing that was a real kind of tragedy of it, worked out well. We had a Indigenous youth program that we were teaching Indigenous youth who basically had no skills, and they would work to build homes. So we got about 9 homes built. We're gunning to build 12 homes with them. Different cohort would come in, different students would come in per house. We'd have about 10 students, youth on center. These were youth that never held a drill before, never held a saw. And then at the end of it, they stood back and they built a house. And they stood back and they achieved something, and it just did great things. we had to move to a warehouse program where they're basically learning to build walls. Again, the positive of it is they can make a mistake on the wall in a warehouse and learn from it and redo it, right? When you're putting a wall up of a house, you can't make that mistake, right? So so there's some real positives to that they're working out of a warehouse, but it really took away their energy and that kind of feeling of, man, I just built a house that added to Niagara's affordable housing stock. So that was a downside. It was just because of the pandemic, we couldn't have, 1,300 square foot bungalow. We couldn't have 12 youth working in there at a time. So we rented a big warehouse with our partner, the Indigenous Nipan, and we spread the youth out, and they're building walls, they're doing foundation in a warehouse, they're putting together kitchens, they're doing all that stuff. So yeah,
well, that was able to continue then.
There was a delay in it, but they've extended it 6 months to make up for the 6-month delay. But that was a real challenge. We're trying to build a house and we're trying to set up a warehouse and we're trying to, move students over here and still continue with the half-built house that we had going. So it was a real challenge on our construction and volunteers that work in our construction.
So in the houses that you were building, then you said you've followed more of a traditional model. So it would have been the traditional trades charging the traditional amounts as opposed to as opposed to volunteer contributions from the companies.
Yeah, exactly. So that created a whole nother challenge, right? You have an increased cost of the homes, you have decreased revenues, and then I mean, I don't need to tell everyone knows what's happening to the land prices and everything in Niagara. So it's a real compilation of different challenges, but you know what, the community's been great and we're still forging ahead and we're moving forward into the building more homes in the next couple of years. So yeah.
That's great. So let's move on to talk a little bit more about sort of where you see things going. I know, Elizabeth, your new facility on Oakdale Avenue in St. Catharines is beautiful. I think you probably faced some construction delays yourselves as the trades had to adapt to the new health and safety rules. Where do you see the YWCA going post pandemic?
Well, certainly, as you just said, John, we're just still getting settled into our new building. This is an addition to the programs we already have operated. I think just, probably just stabilizing over the coming year. And I think, again, for my concern is what's going to happen in the community as things start to open up. And so I'm not sure how much we can prepare for that, but being, I think, aware that we may need to be able to adjust to particularly in sheltering, to find ways to accommodate an increased number of people who may be facing homelessness, again, because of the increased costs of housing. Certainly we've seen a little bit of that, but I'm still concerned that we're going to see a lot more of that in the coming months. I think the other piece too is, we've seen us in our organization and across other organizations that have had to continue, who have, done that essential work, the stress load on staff, and how in the moment, in the crisis, you're doing fine. And then once the crisis is done, that's when things start to fall apart. So being really, really, aware, and we've been doing a lot to ensure the wellness of our staff. But to ensure that, staff are good and that they're also, we're doing what we can right now to ensure that they're taking their breaks and holidays as they need to, so that they do continue to be well. So I think a lot of it will be just being mindful of all those things as we move into this next phase, and then being able to respond, where also, what is going to happen with fundraising. We've been very fortunate. The community's been incredibly generous. Will they continue to respond post the post pandemic? Are we still going to be able to raise the funds? Are we going to see a dip? Like all these things that we're trying to anticipate at this point, and do what we can to mitigate any potential issues that might be coming down the road.
Yeah, I know when you talk about homelessness, people immediately kind of think of people who are on the street, which of their if you look around downtown St. Catharines, there seems to be lots of people who are struggling right now. But at the same time, when you talk about homelessness, you talk about a predominantly different group of people, but maybe you could talk a little bit about what that group kind of looks like, and then why the kind of existing programs are important.
Yeah, I think, we have this idea of what homelessness looks like, when the reality of it, the street entrenched homeless is actually a small percentage of the larger population of people who are experiencing homelessness. And for women and families, it tends to be more what we would call the hidden homeless. So they've been couch surfing with friends or family, or they're living in very precarious housing situations, unsafe housing situations. And so then it comes to a point of crisis where they can't manage anymore, and then they're experiencing homelessness. We have lots of families who come through our door. I think it's about a quarter of the people that we serve are children under 18. And I think we don't think about children being homeless, and yet that's, it's a stark reality for who we see. And so any kinds of changes in the housing market have very direct impact, job losses, changes in the economy. Anybody who's just working on the fringe or just managing, it takes one life incident that can change everything, and they can lose their housing. And so having programs like we do is we can catch. It's that safety net that catches people before they, we don't want to see families living in cars. We don't want to see children without a safe space to be. And then we've seen the increase because again, the pandemic has created so much stress right across, and people's mental health has deteriorated right across the board. So those who are experiencing that much higher level of stress, their mental health and their well-being has been that much more compromised as well. So I think that the role that we play is to, provide that safety and support, and to help people to, manage through this time, as we do through any time, but even more sensitive to the impacts that the pandemic has had on people.
Yeah. So Stephen, I know like we've been seeing the YM has been forced to close facilities based on the model that compounded by the pandemic. That's got to have some significant impact on the morale and mental health of your remaining staff. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yes, for sure. I'm glad that you touched upon this, because I'm continue to be so impressed with how resilient our staff is despite all that has happened. The continued downsizing and closure of our key branches across the region have not only put staff in that layoff situation, but also we've had to terminate hundreds. So from a staff morale standpoint, it's been hard. I think I can sense that staff are feeling tired. There's a sense of burnout, and they're looking for that light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that we're working towards that, and one of which really is looking at that renewed health, fitness, aquatics model. Right now, we have almost this all-inclusive membership model. So we're looking at ways to renew what that may be like post-pandemic. And this 15 months or so has given us time to pause, reflect, reset, so that when we bounce back, we would have a better sense as to what we envision as the YM will look like moving forward. Yeah. And I also just want to point out that for everything that we've done so far, we've applied 3 principles to every COVID-related decisions that we've made. And number 1 is about health and safety. So it's not just for our staff, but also our clients, our volunteers, our partners. Number 2, community interest. Are we remaining to be relevant? Are we just doing the same old? Because things have changed. And I think that many families, many young people, many adults and seniors have already found alternatives to some of the things that we used to offer, because the pandemic has forced them to be more creative. So are we remaining relevant? And number 3 would be about financial viability for us. As a charity, while we want to continue to provide excellent service in a way that's free or low cost or low barrier, there is still a business sense behind it all. So in every decisions, we always look back to those 3 points that I just mentioned, and that relates to staged reactivation. So we're hoping to reopen our buildings and our services in a gradual approach, not all at once, as we did last fall, and that was a decision that we look back on and say to ourselves that we shouldn't have. Staffing is one as well. You know, can we get everybody on back in the same way? Do we need to be more mindful of staff that are working remotely, and can we continue to support that remote work arrangement? Because a lot of staff will be asking about that, and we need to be prepared for those arrangements. We need to look at our standards and protocols, how to assess if a specific site is really where the community wants to receive service, and how can we ensure that the organization is being preserved for another 160 years of great service. So many points to the questions that you've raised for sure.
You come from you come from a GTA's community health center. I'm just retiring from the board of the Niagara Falls Community Health Center. I've done my 6-year term, so it's a really interesting model. It's a nice complementary model that I see with YMs. I think it's an interesting move for you. Maybe you could are you planning on bringing some of those lessons from the community health center experience into the YMCA and maybe talk a little bit about that, as well as what a CHC does?
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you mentioned that. So for those of you that are here and listening, CHC is a short for community health centers. There are CHCs all across the province and across the country as well. And the purpose of the CHC is unique in the sense that it adheres to what's known as the social determinants of health. And that is, it doesn't just look at one's physical health, but also a multitude of social variables in life, from one's mental health to one's education, employment, all these multitude. There's some, it depends on the model you're looking at. There's probably up to 12 or so different variables that determines one's health equity. And so in looking at that model, we very much feel that there are ways where we can incorporate that into the Y by not just looking at the traditional sense of health and fitness and in the swimming pool, but a range of community programming, a range of programming that supports a young person from prenatal all the way to adulthood and all the way to seniors, and how we can provide that wraparound support. And so I definitely feel that there's great opportunity for us to bring and leverage those components together to really strengthen the benefits that we're providing to the community. And one of the things I will say is that what the CHC has done really well and continue to do so is, working in partnerships and collaborations with other stakeholders. And so my hope is to continue to leverage that approach to partnership and collaborations with all the other complementary organizations in the Niagara region, so that we are helping to meet the needs of the community while minimizing the duplication of services.
Right. Yeah. So David, Elizabeth talked a fair bit about children and youth who are at risk and in the shelter in the shelter system. How much of your kind of client population would be either not necessarily in the shelter system, but be vulnerable to falling into that system? And how are you managing through that?
Well, so I found it very interesting. Elizabeth touched on this idea that as things get better, they're also starting to fall apart for certain people. And we're definitely seeing that a lot in our sector here, that we have a lot of youth who, particularly in the last 6 months, since Christmas, have been going, I'm fine, I'm used to it, I'm fine. And then just recently, as we were finally able to reopen our doors and they were able to actually come in and spend time with their staff, they're not fine. And they haven't been fine. And all of these problems that were sort of festering under the surface, that they were just kind of pushing off to the side because they felt like there wasn't anything they could do about them while they were stuck at home. Now that things are opening up, now these problems are absolutely beginning to boil over. We've seen in the last 2.5 weeks that we've been open, we've already got 3 kids who are looking for places to live because either they're getting kicked out or they just can't be at home anymore. And you know, normally these are the sort of situations where they might have been able to make it to graduation. They might have been able to make it through to the end of high school at least. And because they were sort of trapped in their houses with their families that they just couldn't escape, it made things much, much worse. So we're certainly seeing a lot of that. And kids that normally wouldn't have needed that extra support definitely are looking for more resources and services than they would have before.
Right.
So on our end, what we're trying to, I mean, we do what we can do, and that's always been our model. We're a very flexible, very adaptive organization. So it comes down to sitting down with each individual youth saying, what can we do to support you, and trying our absolute hardest to get everything that they need. Housing obviously is a very difficult thing to provide, and we're so thankful for organizations like YWCA and everybody else who is working towards more affordable housing in Niagara. It certainly is a huge, huge issue.
So we're moving into our last segment. I'll start with you, Mark, about lessons learned. So I'm interested in your online store, for example. First off, are you going to keep that store going and keep doing online sales? And really, what lessons have you learned that you are going to be carrying into the future?
I'll start a few things. I'll start out with our families and lessons about affordable housing. So, you know, one of the great myths is in Habitat, you don't just get a house, you actually pay a mortgage. But Habitat holds the mortgage, and Habitat can adjust the mortgage to 30% of your income. So if you are working, you pay more, and it's straight equity that you're paying. So you're paying equity down, and you buy the house at market value. That way, you know, a Habitat family can't sell a house and you know, make money off of it. So where are we going to go with that? Lessons we learned was the importance of having that flexibility for our families. When layoffs happened and they ended up in a tough situation, Habitat families really fared out well because we were able to make adjustments to their mortgage payments. And many of them, at first it adjusted down, but many of them went right back up. And then some of them even said, hey, I want to pay more. I have more money right now. I want to pay more on my equity. And that really, because that's only profits them. So we learned the importance of that being somebody living within 30%, their housing cost only being 30%. And that's a challenge in our community right now. It's a challenge to the young people in their 20s. It's a challenge to someone buying a home right now. But the importance that we as a community, I believe, have to really continue to work on making sure there's enough affordable housing for the health of our community. I mean, you know, many of our Habitat homeowners work in the hotel industry, work in the service industry. Many of them switched over to skip a dish. Many of them switched over and changed their careers because they had to. Things we've learned too, online sales. We were just, you know, yes, we're keeping the online store open. Yeah, we put a lot of time and energy, and we've also realized we reach such a bigger market too. You know, a lot of people will look online now before they come to the store to see what we have. People are buying. Sure, it creates a challenge for our staff. An item, you know, because we don't have like 17 of one item. Everything's donated. That item sells, you got to go out and hit the sold. You got to put sold on it right away before someone picks it up and brings it to the till, right? And then yeah, we're going to do it. Now, I'll say this, John, it allowed us to reach markets. We have people coming from Toronto. We have people coming from outside of Niagara who are going online, picking out the item, buying it and purchasing it and driving down and picking it up. So it's in some ways, it's helping us increase our market for our products. Yeah, things like that. Things we've learned too, housing wise, we're looking to change our you know, we've kind of always focused on single family homes and stuff. We are looking at probably with today's market and the way and a lot of people moving to Niagara, we're going to be building townhouses coming up. We're moving into townhouses, and we're going to be looking at probably you know, multi-unit buildings. So something, hopefully we can get there where we do like a multi-unit, so many condos so people are kind of owning or are owning condominiums and stuff. So we're looking at more density You know, right now it's expensive but what we've learned over this pandemic is that we can do it, that we can make more density. We can take a piece of property and put 5, 6, 7 townhouses on that piece of property and serve 5, 6, 7 families. So yeah, those are kind of lessons we've learned too along this. You know, not everyone has to work in an office. I'll say that you know, our staff can be flexible in recruiting, and some of our staff, we've learned that we can get talented individuals that, you know, are going to do a blend, be in the office a couple days and work from home 3 days, and that to them is, hey, I'll take less money, I'll do all that so I don't have to commute and travel anymore, and I can move out of the GTA area and move to Niagara and would be great with this. So yeah, those are some of the lessons we've learned. You know, the lessons we've learned. I'll tell you one thing we learned. We need the community to donate to us. If we don't have the donations, it's difficult. And how much we depend on volunteers and our community partners and programs. When it ran our staff just absolutely, just exhaustion when we didn't have the amount of volunteers that we had. So we have learned how important volunteers are, and the whole community is to making affordable housing. So
yeah. So Elizabeth, what lessons have you learned through the pandemic that you're going to be bringing forward into the YWCA of the future?
I think that the importance of flexibility. So, you know, being able to provide programs in different ways. You know, our skills development programs had to be done in different ways. So being creative and, you know, also the resilience and the ability to continue to move forward despite everything. So, you know, as I said, our staff were able to open up a new program. We were able to continue to build and come to completion of our project. I think all those things, you know, you see that level of resilience that staff have and clients too, you know. So being, you know, we are always really as responsive as we can for clients. You know, we try very hard to be, you know, delivering person-centered services, and the importance of being able to do that. And I think the other thing that became very clear too is that we are, as humans, are social beings, and we need social contact. And how do we manage through that too? You know, we see it in our clients and their need for social contact, and our staff. You know, we've been able to start to have some staff back in our space. We've moved our administration over, and it's just been incredible to see the spirit of staff as they're able to come back in and, you know, have those in-person contacts with people. So it's finding all those balances. I think that's been the key piece to all of this, is just striking the balances so people can be well, you know, mentally well, you know, physically well, and at the same time that we're able to provide the needed services that we do. And I think those are the things that we'll carry forward.
But what about you, David? You've been open for a couple of weeks. Again, what lessons did you learn through these last difficult 15 months that you're going to bring forward?
I think primarily the biggest thing for us moving forward is one of the things that's come out of this pandemic is that it's become much more socially acceptable to look for mental health support. You know, there was always a huge stigma around going to counseling, getting therapy, and that's existed for decades. But in the last 15 months, this idea that it's okay to not be okay has gained major mainstream acceptance because everybody was dealing with it. I don't think there's a soul on the planet who made it through the last 15 months without struggling at least once. And so we're seeing like that stigma, that idea of only the you know, the weak or the crazies need help has almost disappeared in the last 15 months. That it's okay if you need to sit there and talk to somebody, that's a normal thing now. And that for us is one of the huge opportunities to pursue moving forward, is that anybody can need help, and that's okay. And that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you or that there's something broken with you. It just means you need a little bit of help, and that's fine. We're also looking forward to seeing how the education system has adapted for these kids. And while I'm sure they're looking forward to going back into the classroom, and that is going to be the best thing for most of these youth, there are definitely youth that did better online, that were not performing well in a normal school setting. And particularly out here in West Niagara, we're not always able to offer as many courses as we'd like. There are limits to how many teachers you can have in a school. But now that our education systems have developed a lot of better online structures and programmings, that the idea of doing correspondence school, online school for subjects you otherwise wouldn't normally be able to learn in high school is absolutely an opportunity moving forward for them as well. So some interesting things coming out of it for sure.
Yeah, very interesting. And Stephen, lessons learned through this very, very tough period?
Yes, lessons learned. I think I will share my 3 insights. And the first one really is about learning to be adaptive. And that's being flexible and nimble and no longer focused on simple brick and mortar, because we all need to hybridize and look into ways where we can leverage the power of technology and virtualize. Number 2, train our staff and leaders to be able to thrive in uncertainties. It's a skill to have and a competency that we're not quite comfortable with, but how can we develop that in-house through training and other mentorship mechanisms? Because what we used to know is no longer the same, and we need to be ready and equipped for change at any time. And the third thing I will say is, not just for our organization, but for all the organizations that is in that charitable nonprofit sector, to be able to articulate their brand, their story, because it's no longer about what we've done yesterday. It's about who we are today and what do we want to be tomorrow, given all the changes as a result of the pandemic.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's all the time I have. And I'd like to thank our guests, Elizabeth Zimmerman, Mark Carl, David Vandersteen, and Stephen Chuang for joining us. At this point, to take us out, I would like to ask Rebecca Shelley from the Grimsby Chamber. Rebecca.
Thank you, John, and thank you too to our excellent panelists in the not-for-profit sector today. As John Armstrong mentioned, my name is Rebecca Shelley, and I have the absolute honor of serving Grimsby's business community as the Executive Director of the Grimsby and District Chamber of Commerce. Thank you to everyone for joining us this morning for the final June panel discussion. This series has been organized by the Niagara Chamber Partnership, which John D'Amico mentioned at the beginning of the session, represents businesses and organizations from a multitude of municipalities across Niagara, Fort Erie, Grimsby, Lincoln, Niagara Falls, Niagara-on-the-Lake, Thorold, Port Colborne, Wainfleet, Welland, Pelham, and West Lincoln. Today's not-for-profit session concludes the 5-part series that we kicked off at the beginning of June with Regional Chair Tim Bradley's participation in the winery and agriculture session. Over the past 5 weeks, we've heard insights from 5 sectors, including the winery and agriculture, tourism, construction, manufacturing, and concluding with today's not-for-profit session. It truly has been a fascinating learning experience, hearing the ins and outs of how different industries have responded to the extreme challenges of the pandemic, reflecting back on the last 15 months, and then looking forward to the future. I would like to extend a huge and heartfelt thanks to John Armstrong from Armstrong Communications, who has not only moderated these sessions, but managed the flow with an abundance of both grace and intellect, and elicited truly compelling observations and insights from industry leaders across Niagara. Thank you, John.
Oh, my
Another big thank you. Another big thank you goes out to Brian LaChapelle and B4 Networks for being our tech sponsor and making it possible for the Niagara Chamber Partnership to bring you these sessions. Here in the Chamber Network, we value these kinds of ongoing partnerships with local businesses because it means they believe in the merit and relevancy of the programming we're bringing forward. Thank you, Brian and B4 Networks. The 8 chambers and 1 board of trade that comprise the Niagara Chamber Partnership are very proud to partner to bring this series to Niagara because it really does showcase the immense value of collaboration. We truly live the stronger together mantra every day and wholeheartedly believe that working together allows us to be more than the sum of our parts, as they say. Our 9 organizations collaborate regularly to bring Niagara Chamber Partnership membership benefits to businesses throughout the region. to put our collective resources behind important advocacy efforts, and to bring you relevant, informative event programming like this series. We look forward to continuing the Road to Recovery series this fall and hope we'll see each of you at an upcoming event. On behalf of my colleagues in the Niagara Chamber Partnership, thank you to all of our panelists, to Brian, to John Armstrong, and to you, our audience, for joining us. Stay safe, everyone, please, and have a wonderful summer.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.